I've tried using the language of internally cohesive for
Hmm.
talking about different expressions of Christianity. So sometimes I go and make videos at churches that aren't like mine,
Right.
where I know they think things I don't think. We do not debate, but we
Right.
go right at the stuff, right at the differences. I just ask and then they tell me what they think and we move on to the next thing. The goal is give me the most beautiful expression of this thing you think is beautiful that isn't my thing you can possibly give me in 40 minutes. That's what we're shooting for. But when I sit down and evaluate those at the desk, after the fact, I'm thinking about, okay, what did I learn there? What did I see? What are they doing? One of the things that I found to be really helpful for myself that I've discovered along the way is just, does that work with itself? And there are groups, yeah, I'll pass on saying which ones, but there are groups I've made videos with where my chief complaint isn't, hey, you said things I didn't think before I met you. I don't like that. No, 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 no. My complaint is your thing doesn't work with itself. It's internally incoherent, and I think it's a result of lack of examination.
Hmm.
You were born out of a historical pressure, and so you're trying to hold on to a thing that doesn't work with what you're trying to be now, and I don't want to think it. Whereas it's really easy to give Catholics the benefit of the doubt on places where I disagree if I just mentally try to imagine holding 4 or 5 assumptions I don't hold
Right.
that they do.
Right.
So, in terms of internal cohesion, yeah, I think there are 5 or 6 threads of historic Christianity where, yeah, okay, I see how that all fits together. And then there are a lot of others, and I think those will die out that just don't work within themselves as a set of assumption. I think studying the Bible is the same way. Does this read, is it cohesive with what you're doing with the rest of the text?
Okay, I'm not going to go down that trail. You're tempting me, but not right now.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, can I ask, and maybe you don't know this off the top of your head, but you do several things on your YouTube channel, but what are the most viewed things?
It's, uh, with a few exceptions, it's always going and talking with Christians who don't think what I think.
That's what I thought. I
Yeah.
kind of skimmed through it a long time ago and thought like, whoa, those are really well watched videos.
If I
Um,
want a video to fail, talk about the Bible on my Bible channel.
that's
Like if I just want to guarantee that a video is going to
that's just not the
underperform
content we're here
relative to
for.
my subscribership and the rest of the channel,
Yeah.
just sit down and be like, let's look at the book of Ephesians.
Let's
Like,
just see
I
what it
mean,
says.
every single person
Yeah.
sitting on their toilet scrolling their phone gets to that and just gives it a middle finger and keeps going. I don't want that.
But as soon as they see like the camera walking into an Orthodox church, right? They're like,
Ooh,
golden onion, what's going to happen,
look
right?
at that guy's beard. Look, they
Right.
got paintings of peacocks.
Right.
This is going to be a fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people like the possibility of. Okay, two kinds of people show up for that. One, I think, people who like the possibility of a fight. But the other kind, I think, are the people who like the possibility of these things actually being compatible and them not having to solve it. And I'm always looking for language in those conversations to to try to find that compatibility. It's why we talk about the creeds a lot in those
Mhm.
conversations. They go, okay, okay, look, we're not gonna un-Reformation. Like there's still gonna be Protestants. And the charismatics are not going to uncharismatic. There's going to be those. The Italians, they're probably going to stay Catholic.
Most of the
They
time.
seem really committed. I don't know if you're familiar with Poland, but they seem really into it as well. I think a lot of those Greeks are pretty locked in on Orthodoxy at this point, and a lot of those Egyptian Christians, I bet they're going to stay Copts, and I bet their kids will too. So if we're if we're not just going to try to crush each other in debate and destroy every bit of Christianity that isn't the one winner that eventually emerges, the alternative is we're going to have to find language. We're going to have to do a bit of innovation to find a way to say that Eastern Orthodox guy is a Christian and my convictions about the Bible are true at the same time. And I think people who like those videos are picking up what I'm putting down and they're interested in hunting for that language
Yeah.
with me.
I would guess also there's probably a third cadre. There's probably more than this, but I bet you there's another large sector that is just like, yeah, I don't know anything I don't understand anything about Eastern Orthodox. I just want to hear what they're about, right? Like, just
Y-
curious.
You're right. I mistakenly broke that down into two parts. I mean, they're educational videos. They're meant for people who want to learn things about things. So,
Yeah. No, I'm sure that is driving, which is an impulse that I feel is one that you can work with, right? Just like, oh yeah, I don't understand that. I work in I direct this multi-faith Jewish, Hebrew, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim project, and I mean, a lot of it that compels me is just like, yeah, I don't know what Muslims think about that.
right?
I'm all
Yeah.
ears when they start talking. I'm like, tell me what you guys do with providence, whether you think that's a thing or not. God.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sign up for your thing, but I really
Right.
want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they as well with Christianity. I mean, we had a long late night conversation about what do Christians do with God's sovereignty, and they were just like, "This is fascinating." They could, and the seven different views that we offered them. So I think there's a lot of that goodwill, especially, and again, I work with 18 to 25-year-olds in college. That's where I spend a lot of my energy. Um, and so I feel like they're much more okay with saying, I don't, I'm not trying to believe this. I just want to know what people think over there, right? And there was a period when I wasn't a Christian, but I grew up in Oklahoma where there's a few Christians. There's a population density of not just Christians, but weird Christians in Oklahoma, right? And especially in Tulsa or Roberts University. I just
I
got
just
off.
want the people of Oklahoma to know that Drew said that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah, yeah.
didn't
No,
say that.
hey, I'm one of you. So, and I'm now a weird Christian, but um, I just remember that energy of that kind of just like, this is the absolute truth, and you must believe it, or you are going to hell. I mean,
Me too.
that's not invented language. I don't think it was what everybody was saying, but it certainly there was some of that energy in the air, and I was just like, oh yeah, not interested, pass. I'll do something else. Um, Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters. Okay, I want to talk about, because you're writing a book on how to understand the whole Bible, how the different parts and books fit together. And we're doing this series where we're asking people who popularize the Bible understanding, like yourself and the Bible Project and those kinds of people, um, and also just scholars who just do this for a living at the technical level. And the question really is, well, maybe you can give us an example of one theme, one pattern that you see as obvious, open, and available to anybody who reads the Bible, who sits down and reads it from front to back, something they should see and notice that you would emphasize.
It was always meant to be for everybody.
Oh,
The idea of the global church isn't some theological innovation of the first century AD. This is everywhere from Genesis 12 forward. It's everywhere. But
yeah.
it's like,
I would
oh,
say Genesis 1 forward, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
what
Yes.
do they well, I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it becomes smoking gun
Right,
obvious
right, right.
from 12 forward. Uh Come on, man. What do they call the psychological effect where once like you buy a certain type of minivan and you've never even heard of it, but now
And
you
then
see
you
them
see it
everywhere?
everywhere. Yeah. I don't know
The
what I
Bader
have a degree.
Meinhof. The Bader Meinhof phenomenon. I think that's what they call it, right? And it's just like that. I mean, if you read through the whole Bible and no one's ever just whispered in your ear, "Hey, look for the stuff about this being for all the nations," and think about what an innovation this was, that there was a religion that wasn't local, regional, and ethnic, but that was always targeted toward a global, all of time, all of humanity view. You're going to see it everywhere.
Right.
Well, then it's like the stinking minivan. Now all of a sudden it's in your head and you're going, how did I miss this? It's everywhere. But I mean, Cleopas and his buddy on the road to
Yeah.
Emmaus, they missed it. They knew
Yeah.
enough about the Bible to want to show up to see if Jesus came back to life, and they missed it. So, how
And
many more
even when they
things
had
like that?
Jesus explaining it to them, they still didn't quite get
Still
it.
took a minute. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, you look like Jesus.
Yeah.
It all worked out in the end. So, stuff like that. The theme of the day of the Lord, and it not being good or bad, but both
Right.
and
Right. Good for some,
the
bad for
day of
not.
Yeah, and sometimes the day of the Lord is bad for me, and sometimes the day of the Lord is good for me and my team. That you know, just the way cheap knockoff religions have their apocalypses written in such a way that we are good, you are bad.
Mm.
The day of the Lord is sort of a phrase that emblemizes how throughout the Bible the point of view team are the bad guys as often as anything else. They're sympathetic, but
Which makes
they're
it
idiots.
ironic that the Isaiah scroll was so prominent in the Dead Sea community, who clearly had this very black and white, good guys, bad guys mentality, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but no, the righteous justice, judgment, and virtue of God, Him being right in all of His judgments and decisions, that is a double-edged sword, and the day of the Lord summarizes that. So there's that theme. Um, but I don't know. We could take up the rest of the time
No, no,
talking
no.
about
Yeah,
those kind of
these are,
threads, but that's the stuff I want to kind of
yeah.
pull on and get people to start noticing. I mean, I guess you call that a motif. It's more than a theme, right? It's a
Yeah.
thread that runs through the whole thing.
It is like the phrase that some Mark scholars will use of Mark, because Mark always comes off at first glance like a very simple, terse, quick moving story. Yeah. And then you get into it and you start studying and you're like, wait a second. And there's a whole story about Mark scholarship, how it exploded once people kind of realized what was going on in the text. But they call it, there's a phrase, interwoven tapestry is the phrase used in Mark. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's true of Mark in the whole collection of text. And this, I'm so glad you brought up I would never have expected you to say this, but the issue that it was always for everybody, that the promises of God were always for everybody. I, I feel like Chicken Little all the time saying this in class, and does that analogy make sense?
Yes. No, I'm just
Okay.
surprised that that
Yeah, it
is
is
the
so
reality.
burned into people. You end up just having to say really provocative things like there is nothing new in the New Testament, and then prove me wrong. Yeah, and then you kind of say like, okay, there are a few things like we now know the name of this guy Jesus of Nazareth, who's going to be the executor. Yeah, the idea that God comes as King incarnate would have been kind of there's certain things. Actually, I think the most, you can correct me if you think something else, but I think the most astonishing thing to a first century Jew would be that the presence of God would move from the temple into individual people. That would seem
Yes,
kind of
but also,
incomprehensible.
I mean, and maybe look, you're the expert on this. I read it a lot. I think about it a lot. I got my reads on it, but to me, it seems like there would have been 400 years, everything post Artaxerxes II up until Jesus. There would have been this, really, everything post Zerubbabel and the Second Temple dedication. There would have been this nervousness about God actually in there? Because last time
Yeah,
it was pretty obvious that he
yeah,
was in there. And then finally, somebody empirically tests the thing in the form of Gnaeus Pompey Magnus. He's like, I heard this
yeah,
like rumor that you can't go in there, but I don't think your God's in there. I'm going to go in.
yeah. I'm gonna put a
Like,
pig in there.
it, it seems like there was this sense of, I read into it a little bit, this sense of hand wringing and nervousness that maybe the temple isn't now what the temple was once, and I think about the way that dovetails with the idea of God not living in temples anymore, but
Yeah,
in you, in the believer.
I mean, I always hate saying these things on this podcast because then I get emails where they say, "Well, what do you mean by that? What's have you written on this?" And like
Why
you
is
can't
that
give it.
bad, man?
Well,
That's
you
great.
can't give a single opinion without people saying like, "Let's see your article," on this.
Well, okay, well that's one of the luxuries of what I do is my answer can just be no. I
No,
I
I
don't
just work.
know. There's lots of people who work on this.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I'm
exactly.
not going to fight with you. I have to put out another episode tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think there's a lot of skepticism towards the temple in general. Even Solomon's temple, I think God is very skeptical of, and that the writers of the Scroll of Kings, is trying to constantly throw sand in the motor of the temple. But that's good.
Chronicler's a little more optimistic, you
Yeah,
think?
chronicler is always, they can polish a turd like nobody's business. So I mean,
You
they
are going
made
to get
David look
emailed.
good.
You're getting emailed.
No, there's a definitely a dispositional difference between Chronicles and
Yeah.
Samuel and the Kings, right? But this, I think, gets to the point that I really wanted to ask you about for this series, which is, okay, how do we justify what we're seeing as a pattern? Because we've all stared at a wooden door and saw Jesus's face in it at some point. If we,
Pareidolia. Yeah.
yeah, and how do you justify the pattern? And just for yourself, like how do you make yourself confident that you're seeing something that's actually there? And then, have you ever gone too far, or you read somebody and you're like, nah, you're totally projecting things back into there? I had this argument
Yes.
with Tom Wright about the temple and creation, and I'm just like, Tom, I think you're projecting the temple back into the Eden that's just not there. And I understand why a first century Jew would do that. I just don't understand why an Iron Age Israelite would ever think that. Um, and so we had to go back and forth, and we still disagreed, but we know precisely why we disagreed now. So I wonder what would be some examples like that for you.
It's the Bible is true in so many different versions of what true means.
Okay.
I mean,
Now
so
I've written on
so
the
look, I
biblical
just saw an
definition
interview
of
with
truth, so
Tony Gilroy, who made Andor, and he did the Bourne movies.
I'm
Maybe
sorry, I talked over you there.
I
What was
just
your,
Tony Gilroy.
you
Uh,
interviewed this guy?
no, I just saw an interview with him
Okay.
where he was talking about his new project is a Disney Plus Star Wars series. I mean, it's pretty
Oh,
grown up. It's not dirty or anything, but it's
right.
more like adult targeted, called Andor, and it's about the more gritty themes of practically what would it take to actually overthrow a galactic rebellion, and
Okay.
what would you have to sacrifice if you don't get to keep what you have if you throw a rebellion. It's very thoughtful. Um, Disturbingly humanizing of the bad guys. But he was getting interviewed about it, and boy, he's a good interview. But there were themes that people are catching, people like me, caught in Andor, where I'm just sure, oh my goodness, look at that. Why did he turn that phrase? This guy's a student of history. That's that's the Republic. I know where that line's from. And he's like, yeah, it's not. Oh, oh, okay, but somewhere in the ether, it is though, because Plato said it, and that leaked, and whether other people knew it informed them or not, it did inform them. And so he can say, I didn't know that was from Plato, but it's still from Plato. Even if it's morphed and simulacred a few times over, it's still from Plato. And I think the same thing happens, or much more so it happens with the Bible, where because it is so true on so many levels, I mean, sure. I mean, the garden motif, maybe there are places where the biblical author didn't have that in mind. In the minor prophets or running into the New Testament. Clearly, it is in mind at the end of Revelation. But it's not like you're wrong for seeing the connection because it's still true. It's just like dying on that hill doesn't make sense. So, for example, I'm working on Galatians right now on my daily Bible podcast. We pick a book of the Bible. It's like drive time radio. Try to make it funny and fun, but we take ground 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week on a book of the Bible until we're done. 800 days to get through Matthew. It's going to be,
Whoa.
I don't know, 200 and some on Galatians right now. Well, we just got to the line in Galatians. The line. As for those agitators, I wish they'd go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Okay. So we're going to start off by covering, the positive and the negative approach. What must it mean? What can't it mean?
Right.
Stuff like that. And just make it fun. We don't use fancy language like that. But then I'm going to give myself an extra day because my medium gives me all kinds of grace and leeway to chase down anything.
Hmm.
And I did a bonus eunuch episode on it. Like we just did Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Well, how were eunuchs thought of in
Right.
the ancient world, particularly Persia? These were shifty people. The eunuchs are good guys for Esther, but off screen, 10 years after the book of Esther, they got Xerxes killed in his bedroom. I mean, so what is Paul saying by using the word agitator and talking about them emasculating themselves? Well, to me, it's not a crazy leap when writing to a first century audience to imagine that they'd all go like, they're behaving like experts in deception, trickery, cloyingness, and court intrigue here in your Galatian churches. Well, if you're gonna pull eunuch stunts, that kind
Right.
of court nonsense, why do you make it look that way?
Hmm.
Is that the primary meaning of the text? Obviously not. Is it a secondary meaning? Well, I guarantee you I'm not the first person who thought it. So yeah, it is a secondary meaning. does it mean that? And how hard can I pull on the thread of eunuchs throughout the Bible to
Right.
make some larger theological point about modern issues or who God has in view or gender in the Bible? Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. But I
But
have a
certainly you
format
have
that
a
allows me to pull on that thread and then shrug at it and be like, maybe y'all are smart. You can look into it more if you want.
but certainly you have a sniff test there, right? Or what you don't do indicates what you think as well. Like, because okay, lots of moves like that. You know, I read lots of manuscripts for publications, and sometimes they build what I would call a Rube Goldberg argument, where like they'll take that, which I find very interesting, right? Like, oh, okay, eunuchs associated with court deception. And then that's kind of like the starting point. And because eunuchs are, built for deception, that to me seems like the tenuous foundation to build on.
You mean like using it as an interpretive rubric for the rest of Galatians or
Or even
Paul's
like,
letters?
yeah, anytime you run into a eunuch. So now, and really bad arguments would be like, oh, Isaiah 56, promised to eunuchs was actually promising them, even those shifty, deceptive, horrible people are going to have a place in the kingdom or something like that. I mean, I call this bad preaching in hermeneutics classes. I can just start rocking on it. Like, give me a bad premise and I'll just start preaching it.